I call the 2,373rd meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. This meeting is being held in person at City Hall and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to City Hall or joining the Zoom webinar. The meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and Comcast Channel 30 in city limits. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during this meeting. If you would like to address council, you may come to City Hall. However, seating in chambers is limited. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by filling out a yellow comment card for those at City Hall or by emailing ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov for those on Zoom. I'm going to repeat that in a minute here, so you'll get another chance if you didn't catch it. When it's time to take public comment, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, and Zoom participant list and chat. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Written comments may be emailed to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. And with apologies for my Spanish, contamos con servicio de traducción al español cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad para reuniones por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Translation services are also available in other languages. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The City of Milwaukee respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. All right, and now we'll move on to our weekly announcements. Do you know someone who volunteers regularly and went above and beyond in 2022? If so, please nominate them for the 2022 Volunteer of the Year Award. Nominees can include anyone who resides in Milwaukee or is a member of a nonprofit organization or business that serves the Milwaukee community. Nominations are accepted through an online form on Engage Milwaukee through Wednesday, February 15th. And that's the link that you see on the slide, Engage Milwaukee. On Wednesday, February 1st, all are invited to attend the latest edition of the Ledding Library lecture series titled The Volunteers. Starting at 6 p.m. at the Ledding Library, hear about the ins and outs and the successes of the experts that have shaped Milwaukee through the years. Special guests will include previous Volunteers of the Year Award winners. This exciting program will not only encourage your involvement within our city, but will aim to answer questions on how to volunteer. The event will be held in person at the library and streamed live via Zoom. Visit the city's event calendar for details. Usher out the old year and bring prosperity to the new year at a Lunar New Year celebration on Sunday, January 22nd from 12 noon to 2 p.m. at the Milwaukee Community Center. Learn about special traditions through activities, crafts, music, and dance. The event is free and family friendly. Help improve habitats at Spring Park and Elk Rock Island on Saturday, February 4th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Volunteers will be removing weeds, planting native plants, and placing donated Christmas trees in the river for fish habitat. Project instruction, tools, gloves, and refreshments will be provided. And there's a link there on the slide where you can get more details. City Manager Ann Ober will hold the next open door session on Friday, February 24th from 9 to 10 a.m. here in the City Hall Council Chambers. No sign up is necessary. Stop by to ask questions, raise concerns, or just find out more about what the city is up to. For more information about each of these events, please visit the city's homepage at milwaukeeoregon.gov or call 503-786-7555. Anybody know of any events I missed? No? Okay. Then we will move on to our Milwaukie High School Outstanding Student Award, and that'll be presented by Principal Kim Kellogg from Milwaukie High School. Which one? These ones? Okay. All right, so I'm going to look up here. So I'm very excited to have Jabari here as Student of the Month.
Jabari!
It's all totally. There's we have elementary support, all of that, all the way through. Jabari is one of our favorite students, and I want to start with the criteria that we look at. We're looking for students that are, contribute to the community, they've had impact on their community, that they strive for excellence in their academics, their activities, and/or their passion areas, that they've overcome obstacles and are showing growth and are thriving. And so it could be any or all of these pieces. Jabari is just an amazing student. So I want to give a little bit about Jabari. So he's played football for 3 years. He's done wrestling. He plays basketball outside of school. He's been an elementary tutor. You're going to hear a lot about his experience with elementary tutor tonight. And he's done that for 3 years. And so kind of before the pandemic, starting in his 9th grade year, and he's been doing an amazing job with that. He's also working 2 jobs right now currently. He's working both at Party City and PHOS Pizza, along with, sports and all that kind of stuff. And his future plans, going to Clackamas Community College and looking at engineering and kind of mechanics. And so in those areas, and so still trying to decide kind of where he wants, but those are some passion areas. Did I got that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Want to make sure I'm not. So the other pieces about this, and Annie Schlegel, who's a counselor at this school at Lot Wickham, where is doing tutoring. One of the pieces, before I get to that, I want to say that the words that come to mind when I think of Jabari are upstander. He's very protective. He is very responsible. He cares deeply about his family, his friends, and his school. And that has come out. He has stepped in when he sees something that isn't going the right way. He's even with his friends that weren't making some very wise choices. He picked him up, turned around when there was kind of a confrontation. He's like, we're not doing that. And so that upstander and stepping in and supporting his friends. And I thought Annie Schlegel kind of said it well, that not only is Jabari working 2 different jobs and plays football and wrestles, he is positive and caring with his peers. He's supportive and he listens to them when they have challenges, and he offers strength-based solutions to the issues that they face. So in being this well-rounded student, caring about his community, his family, his friends, and his school. So here are some other comments that we have. So his head football coach said for 4 years ago, Jabari walked into Milwaukie High School's front doors as a 9th grade student who was apprehensive about sports and his future. And eventually, okay, I can't quite see what I had on there.
Actually, Scott's going to help you. I think he can drag that to the bottom.
Thank you. He settled in with the support of with the MHS staff, and he was able to focus on strengths and abilities. He joined the football team and thrived as a member of the Mustang family. Without a doubt, those life skills he gained helped shape his mindset and his work ethic. Jabari has grown into a strong young man with a vision that is attainable, and I'm proud of his accomplishments and know he will thrive in whatever he puts his mind to. And you're going to hear some other comments about this. This really kind of speaks to who Jabari is. Sure, if I can get to the next slide.
Probably touched on it when I.
Yeah. Okay, great. Ms. Green said, Jabari has been such a pleasure to work with over the past 4 years. Jabari cares deeply for his peers, his family, and his community, and has shown his compassion in a variety of ways. One of those is being a leader and role model, not only at MHS, but also through the elementary tutor program. Jabari lightens up a room with his infectious smile and his positive attitude. That's true. That's why I said the first thing I noticed about him. I'm very proud of Jabari's kind of managing school, work, and sports, and his character and warm personality will take him far in life. And then Annie Schlegel wrote that Jabari reframed an incredibly negative and racist experience into something that was really uplifting for himself and other in our community, modeling how if these experiences do arise, ways to rise above such hateful speech. In response to an event, he committed to coming to school on his free period regularly to be able to mentor more youth. Jabari created a powerful PowerPoint presentation that he shared with the 5th grade students to encourage strength and a place of belonging amongst Black students. And at this time, Jabari's mentors 5 5th grade boys and 3 3rd grade students. And in most cases, mentors only see 1 to 2 students when they do this experience through high school. So they go in for a period or 2 every week, and then they work with 1 or 2 students. But Jabari's got a whole group. His strength, his wisdom, and outgoing personality bring such positive relationships with our young leaders. He provides a space for students to have more connection. Jabari's mentees look forward to seeing him every day. They are excited to see him, ask about him, and want to connect regularly. He provides such a positive space for students to be themselves, find joy with one another. It was one of our science teachers. Her son goes to the school, and we were getting done with a fire drill, and we're walking through the hall, and he goes, are you Jabari? My son, all I heard about last night, Jabari said this, Jabari said that, and he can't stop talking about Jabari and what an impact he's had on her son's experience about, he told me, this is what I need to do when I went, well, I'm in school. This is how I need to get ready for high school. And so giving lots of positive support. And then we have Miss Barrett, who is our senior counselor. Jabari is one of the kindest, most authentic students I've had the pleasure of supporting at Milwaukie High School. Jabari started at Milwaukie High School as an apprehensive 9th grader who was unsure of how to access support and navigate school. Over the past 3.5 years, we have seen Jabari grow academically and personally and make a positive impact on our school community. Jabari has learned to be a great self-advocate or advocator, and in the process of developing these skills, he has used his voice to speak up for his peers who are facing injustices at school and beyond. And Jabari is a warm presence in each space he inhabits. His smile, his friendly demeanor, and his positivity help those around him to feel supported and comfortable. Jabari once shared with me that in the future, he wants to help others and continue to help his grandmother. I know that he will do both of these things with strength and kindness. And so there's so many things that I've gotten to know Jabari over kind of this since last year and in this 1.5 years. And he is just such a fantastic student and a member of our community. And it's just my pleasure to bring him forward as our Student of the Month.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kellogg.
Yes.
Jabari, if you have something you want to say, you're welcome to say it. Otherwise, what we typically do is each of the counselors takes a minute or two and maybe asks you questions or just commends you for your accomplishments. I am guessing that Counselor Nicodemus is ready to jump in.
I have had the privilege of being on the same campus with Jabari. I was a teacher at Whitcomb when Jabari was a fourth grader and a fifth grader, maybe even a third grader. I think
third grader.
Yeah. And everything that everybody said about Jabari is spot on. Like, there are a couple things that stick out to me about Jabari. Is his smile. Your smile lit up a room. No matter what you were facing, you always showed compassion, which isn't easy for people to do. And I wish more people were like you, Jabari. We need more Jabaris in the world because the world would be a much better place with more of you. And, I was so excited when I saw your name come across in the email. It meant the world to me. I texted Mrs. B, I texted Mrs. Schlegel, or Counselor Annie, and I texted Miss Morgan. She said she wished she could be here. It's so great to have you here because you deserve this. You are a wonderful, wonderful human being, and the city needs engineers.
Yes.
So when you get done with school,
Oh, yeah.
come back and work for the city. But I don't like to talk too much, so I have one question, and I know like you've experienced a lot, and out of all the things that you've experienced, can you think of one thing that you'll remember for the rest of your life that you've experienced?
Honestly, it's just the people that I was hanging out with. Excuse me. And they really changed how I acted. Like, so pretty much to mature more and just like talk it out, like just not be antisocial and all that. So I like to just like keep to myself some of the time, talk to the people that I'm close with, like, because family, friends, those are the two things I rather like just care about. That's all.
Thank you, Jabari.
No problem.
I guess you have family here with you.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce?
Okay. My mom, Crystal Dad, my big brother, Paul, Miss B.
There's lots of people online. So
Yeah.
just watching.
And my grandmother too.
Great.
And then one more thing, my grandfather that's up in heaven too. So yeah.
Great. Well, any other counselors want to ask any questions or
Absolutely.
make remarks?
I just want to say that just from reading the comments, because I read it a little bit before the presentation, you're a leader. You lead by example. And, that term gets lost on us these days. There's a lack of leadership by example. And I think you embody that, not just with your accomplishments, but with your character and how you persevere. You got a bright future. Engineering is tough. I mean, I wasn't a math guy, but I know engineering deals with a lot of math. So we could use that. We need that. We need your light as well. What you're able to do, what you're able to get through, it's going to mean a lot for those coming behind you. And the helping hand that you provide and what you've been faced with and the trials and tribulations that you're probably going to face in the future, you are going to make it through everything that you put your mind to, young man. You are incredible, you're brave, and you deserve every ounce of this. So enjoy it, and I can't wait to see what you do in the future. Which leads me to a next question. You ever consider politics?
No. No.
It's like, no.
We need good leaders in this world. And I'm looking at one right now, so extremely proud of you. Congrats.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Sure. gosh, I don't know what else I can add. This is quite a long list of great accomplishments, Jabari, and I'm going to wish you all the good luck going forward. But you know what? I just kind of figure out you're going to make your own luck, and that kind of thing. You know, I really like the idea that you're mentoring, you know, these younger children and everything like that, because, you know, probably one of the things that I will leave you with is that you're always going to be wanting to, you know, mentor your replacement. And so some of those children that you're mentoring now will be the Jabaris of the future, and that kind of thing. And so continue to do that. Continue to share the wealth of your knowledge and leadership abilities. But I do have one question before I stop. When do you sleep and eat?
Honestly, I don't sleep a lot.
Not surprised. Yeah.
Like, I just go to sleep around like 11:45 and just stay, like, just go to sleep then.
Yeah. Well, you're a dynamo. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Good
doing
luck.
a lot. Yeah.
It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm really glad that you're here and that you're surrounded by people who obviously love and care about you so much. And I think we saw like one of the screens had even more people watching. It's awesome. So I hope that this memory stays with you for a long time, and how special this feels for you and for everyone who came to share it with you. The piece that strikes me is the commitment that you've made to mentor younger students. And when I was in high school, I also mentored at a elementary school, and it was just, it wasn't easy. You know, there are things that come up in your day where you think, you know, I don't know if I can really go and work in that classroom, or if I don't know if I have it in me. But for 3 years, you've made this commitment and you've had an impact on people's lives. And they're going to be growing up here in Milwaukee, and they're remembering that, and then in turn making a difference in someone else's life. And that's a really amazing legacy that you've created here. So I think the question that I have for you is, what advice do you have for elementary school students that you've worked with? What do you leave them with?
I just say, don't be a follower, be a leader. Just do you. Just find the things that you want to do. Don't follow someone that's doing something else, like doing something bad, or doing something, like, do something better. I was like, hey, I want y'all to do something better, like, be better than me. Like, it's not a lot of people out here. So I just told them that.
I think that's a really important message. And one of the quotes that we had in the presentation is about you experiencing some things that were pretty negative on your way to provide tutoring. To be able to process that, and to have a family that's supportive to process that with, and then be able to turn around and go right back into the classroom and show them what a strong person you are, and just to be that example for them, that means a lot. You have had such an impact, I'm sure. So thank you for being here with us tonight.
No problem.
Well, I want to pick up on the tutoring too, and just ask a little bit about are you tutoring at Lot Whitcomb?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you make the decision to do that?
So they choose it for us, because if we go to Lot Wickham, we go to that school, and we don't, we go to a different school.
Oh, okay. I understand that but what made you decide to tutor in the first place? What pulled you to do that?
Because of my nephew, Bishop. So pretty much he got me into it. So I was like, hey, let me just do it for fun.
Yeah.
So I was like, I really like it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, tell kids like part of my life, like what I've been through.
Yeah.
And then don't let them go through stuff that they have to go through.
Yeah.
Just keep on going. Just don't hold yourself back.
Yeah. Great. Great. Well, I was going to say, maybe as you get into exploring further careers, you might end up being a teacher even someday, huh? Or a counselor? No? Well, I will say, I ran into Jabari when we broke from the earlier meeting. And when I read the part up here about his smile brings an instant warmth, I experienced that. He was on the steps. He didn't know me. And, he's just waiting for his family, and he was just super friendly and cheerful and big smile, and yeah, it's great. It's great. I hope that carries you through all the challenges ahead and all the adventures ahead. I think it's an exciting time to be a high school senior and making your way in the world. So I wish you all the best on that journey.
Thank you.
And I will read our certificate. The City of Milwaukie is proud to recognize for outstanding student achievement in academics, civic engagement, and extracurricular activities at Milwaukie High School, Jabari Dent Nelson. Let it be known to all that on this 17th day of January 2023, the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, recognized this student as an excellent example of the bright future of this community and nation.
What's the welcome wall? Always a welcome wall.
Cracking me up. But he's a Mustang now.
I love you, Jabari.
I love you. All right, let's see. We have just, can I move?
It happened again.
Jump in there.
Here we go.
So we have a number of things. So my update about what's happening, we're starting to finish up our semester. We're coming close into finals. And so our students are getting ready for that. We're planning we're in this year, we're planning for next year. We're already starting forecasting for next year for what students will take. We're doing a Finish Strong event with our 9th and 10th graders at the end of the semester. And so we'll be having some tutoring. And so we have probably about 12 teachers who are going to stay after school and support our kids in core academics to finish up some pieces before the end of the semester. We're going to be pulling our data at the end of the semester and seeing where we're at with our students who are on track for graduation and be looking at that together. And then on February 10th, we have our Black Excellence Assembly, and that is being organized. The main organizers are 3 of our students, and they're all 9th grade.
Wow.
So usually you get more of our juniors and seniors who are doing that organization. And with our BSU affinity group, they are working on that, and they've been working really hard. And so we're really excited. And Desi Nicodemus is going to be there to help support our kids. So we're looking forward to that. We have some shows that are coming up, so we'll advertise for that too. We have our comedy sports show that's happening in February 9th and 10th. You're all welcome and invited to come. And then we have Alice in Wonderland that's happening February 22nd and 23rd. And if you're interested in tutoring anyone in here, we're inviting you in for that too. We have lots of opportunities to do some tutoring. So if you're interested, just let me know. Not that you don't have other day jobs, but if you want to give a little time back, just let me know. Okay. So that's kind of the update about kind of what's happening here in January and going into February. So I'll give you an update next month about where we're at.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. Unless anybody has any questions, we'll look forward to seeing you in February, and we'll wish you all the best with the rest of your senior year, Jabari, and what happens after that. And we'll look for you at Pietro's. Okay. Community comments. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community member comments regarding city business. For those in person who wish to speak, please submit a yellow comment card found on the table just outside the door. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand reaction to alert staff that you wish to speak, and when instructed to begin, click the microphone option to unmute yourself. If you are calling in through Zoom and would like to make a comment, dial *9 to raise your hand. You may also submit a comment via email to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. I will note we got one written comment that came in earlier today that is in the materials for tonight's meeting. Mr. Stoffer, before I go on reading the script, do we have anyone who's trying to?
Mayor Beatty, I have no comment cards, and I'm checking the email. No emails, and I will look. No hands raised in Zoom.
Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to disregard the rest of this script and skip that, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes minutes of the City Council December 13th, 2022 study session and December 20th, 2022 regular session. A resolution acting as the local contract review board authorizing execution of a contract with Umpqua Bank for card payment services. A resolution acting as the local contract review board authorizing a contract with Convergent Technologies for security and access control system. A resolution acting as the local contract review board authorizing a contract with Northwest Office Interiors for furniture supply and install. And an Oregon Liquor Control Commission application for Cha-Cha-Cha Mexican Taqueria at 11008 Southeast Main Street, which has a change of owner and new outlet application for their license. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd appreciate a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. None heard. Consent agenda passes unanimously. So we're up with our planning manager, Laura Weigel, to discuss the preliminary housing capacity analysis report.
That's right. Sounds good. Right.
Good evening, Mayor Beatty. Mayor Beatty, nice to see you, and councilors. I'm Laura Weigel, and I am going to be quick. I'm going to hand it over to Beth Goodman. She's the consultant that's been working with us on the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy that we're required to do by the state every 6 years. So we're working under a deadline. We got a grant from DLCD to start this process. We've been working with the Housing Capacity Technical Committee since last summer. We've had 4 meetings at this point, and we will continue to have 3 or 4 more meetings. And so we're starting tonight. We're going to go through the housing capacity analysis, looking at kind of looking at our population projections, understanding who might move here, and then looking at our capacity to provide housing for folks. And so we're going to go through that. And then our next phase is looking at the housing production strategy, where we come up with strategies for actually providing the housing that is needed. So this is phase 1. Beth is going to give you a deep dive into the folks that live in Milwaukie and what kind of land we have available for what types of housing that we're going to need in the future. And with that, Beth Goodman, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I assume that you'll tell me when there are questions in the room and we can get those questions answered.
I can do that.
Thank you. So before I go on, I just want to acknowledge what a nice presentation the last presentation was. That was touching. So, okay. So I think here I am sharing my PowerPoint screen. I apologize if you guys can hear the people cleaning in the background. They're vacuuming our carpets. They'll be done soon. So we are looking at the housing capacity analysis part of this project. It's building on what Milwaukie has been doing over the last several years. So it's building on your comprehensive plan update that you did a couple of years ago, your Milwaukie housing affordability strategy, the MHOS, your community vision, which briefly says all residents to have affordable housing. So it's building on a lot of existing work and bringing new information into this. You do a housing capacity analysis and a housing production strategy to answer questions, first of all, about how much growth are you expecting over the next 20 years? How much buildable land do you have? And do you have enough buildable land to accommodate that expected growth? And then in the housing production strategies, what policies are needed to meet Milwaukee's unmet housing need? So those can be things like changes to regulatory policies, and they can also be new programs or actions. And in that, we're really building on what you've done with your existing MHOS and the work that the city has been doing. So the pieces in color are this project. The housing capacity analysis essentially is your fact base. It tells you a lot about things like developable land and characteristics of residents, et cetera. Your housing production strategy looks at housing affordability in more nuanced way and the needs for different groups, the housing needs for different groups. So that's what you get in this project, and it makes recommendations for changes, potentially to your comprehensive plan policies, but probably not, because you guys have adjusted those so recently. But also maybe changes to your zoning code, changes to your existing housing policies or programs, so on and so forth. Those changes will be recommendations in the housing production strategy and would be implemented over a 6-year period. A lot of this ends up being kind of complicated. So tonight we're talking about the fact base, the housing capacity analysis. As Laura mentioned, we've been working on this for quite a while. It's feeling like a year almost. And we have a few more meetings with our HCTC, our committee who's working with us on this and helping us shape the housing production strategy and what will be in it. And then we'll be in front of you guys a few more times over the next few months. Before I go on, are there any questions?
I see none at the moment.
Okay. So Milwaukee's unmet housing needs. We'll start with your existing housing. So this is your mix of housing in Milwaukie right now, your housing stock. About 67% of your housing is single family detached or single dwelling detached. That's very similar to what you see in the broader Portland Tri-County area, and a little bit less single family detached for the state as a whole, which isn't surprising. So as we're talking about new housing and new housing needs, we're looking at the existing housing stock, but we're doing this in a really different context than you have had before, because you recently passed missing middle housing policies. So we'll talk about that as we go along. About 59% of your housing is owner occupied and 41% is renter occupied. When you look at the kind of housing that people who own housing live in, it's predominantly single unit detached. When you look at the kind of housing that people who rent live in, it's a much wider range of different housing types, with 54% multi-family or multi-unit detached in buildings with 5 or more units. So when we talk about plexes, we're talking about duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and townhouses are attached units. They're on individual lots, but they're attached. So then when we look at building permits, what we see is that Milwaukie has been permitting about 51 units per year over the last little more than decade. A lot of your permits, 51%, have been single detached units, but you've had an increasing number of multi-dwelling units, 45% of your new units. What's not shown on here is new housing that has been permitted and is under development. There's about 800, 900 units of that is currently still undergoing development. And a lot of that is multi-unit housing. So your apartment style housing. It could also be condominiums. So that's not shown on here, but it is documented in the housing capacity analysis.
I did have a question or a comment here, and we can circle back later, but we have been saying we have 1,500 apartments in the pipeline. And I think that's always been a little loosey-goosey. And it was, I think, sort of everything that came after our last housing needs analysis. So it does include some stuff that's been built and stuff that's coming in the pipeline. But I didn't see how the numbers in your report add up to that number. So I do think we need to look at that and see if we've been saying the wrong number. Because you add the 159 plus what you just said, 800, you're still not to 1,000.
It's probably a little closer to 900 because, it's closer to 900, but yes.
And does that include the Hillside project?
I would have to defer to Laura and if Joseph's in the room on this.
I don't think it does.
Okay,
No.
well, that would make up a big.
That would make up,
chunk of
that's exactly the number, right?
Well, close. It still
Basically.
seems it's a little short. But anyway, I mean, we can look at that as you're fine tuning this document. But I just wanted to sort of point that out. Thank you.
Certainly. I think the important thing is that a lot of the multi-dwelling unit housing isn't showing up in this because it's in the pipeline. So I think that's important to acknowledge. So I will take us on, unless there's any other comments.
Not seeing any.
Okay. Oops, sorry. Here we are, looking at people who live in Milwaukie currently. What we're seeing is you've got a growing working age population in Milwaukie, which is a little different than a lot of Oregon's communities. You've got those 20 to 39-year-old people. I think in part because Milwaukie is within the Portland region a little more affordable than some places. So your largest increase in residents since about 2010 were those age 20 to 39. And then you see that you've got a substantial number of people age 40 to 59 and then over 60. So seniors in the future are going to continue to play an important role in your community as across the whole Portland metro region. What we see is that Clackamas County is expected to add about 37,000 people who are over age 60 by 2040. Some of those people are likely to settle in Milwaukie. So demand for housing for people over 60 is going to continue to be an important part of the housing market over this next 20 years. When we look at household size, what we see is that on average, Milwaukee's household size are smaller than Oregon's, possibly as a result of the larger share of people who are 20 to 39 years old. So what you see is a little larger share of people who are one-person households and a little smaller share of people who are 3 or more person households. So when we look at household income, Milwaukie has a little larger share of people who have income below $75,000 compared to the Portland region and Oregon as a whole. So when we look at your median household income at about $61,900, that's below Clackamas County's average and just right around Oregon's average. The share of people who are Latino has grown from 7% in 2010 to 9% in 2019, essentially, adding about 516 people within your community who identify as Latino. And your commuting ends up being an interesting commuting flow. What we see is that there are about 750 people who live and work in Milwaukie, and about 15,000 or 14,500 who work in Milwaukie but don't live within the city limits. That's not surprising, given your location within a much bigger region. So you're attracting people who might live in Portland who might live in unincorporated Clackamas County or in other cities around the region. You're out commuting at about 10,000 people. Isn't surprising. That's people who live in Milwaukee and work elsewhere. It, of course, has implications for the transportation systems. And this isn't all that unusual for smaller cities within the Portland metro region. So looking at median housing sales prices, Milwaukee was more affordable than our comparison cities, except for Gladstone, at about $525,000 median sales price. What we saw is between 2012 and 21, Milwaukee's median sales price increased by $346,000 or 193%. It's a big increase. It's comparable to what we've been seeing in other communities, but still looking at Milwaukee's role within the region, Milwaukee is significantly more affordable than places like Tigard, Happy Valley, Tualatin, Westland, and Lake Oswego. So this is part of the reason that you're seeing a little bit lower average income. And I think the age population, the 20 to 39-year-olds, so do your high schoolers, might they be able to locate in Milwaukee? Well, they're not going to be able to afford this housing sales price. But if they come back as engineers, then you're more affordable than a lot of the communities around. Looking at asking rental prices, we've seen rent prices increase by about 31% since 2011. This rent price here doesn't include utilities. When we take it up by about $250 a month to include very basic utilities, that ends up being nearly $1,600 a month.
So I'm sorry, that rent price is an average across units from studios to 3-bedroom units or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's specifically rent prices that an existing database system called CoStar knows about, which has, it's all multifamily rental units. It's better data than we can get from the census, which always just shows data that's a lot older and outdated for rent prices. It's particularly difficult for rents. So if you think about this, what we've seen is an increase in sales prices of almost 200%, an increase in rents of 31%. And then when we look at income increases, we've only seen income increases over the last few years, when especially adjusted for inflation, but income has been very nearly flat. And so that is leading to our next set of issues dealing with housing affordability. So you're seeing housing price increases, both for ownership and for rentals. And this is across the Portland region and quite frankly, across all of urban Oregon. We're seeing these kind of rent increases as well as sales price increases. So we're going to dive into affordability next. But before I go on, does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to point out when you were talking about the population, and I really commend you pointing out how Oregon and Clackamas County have had historical racist policies that have, and I'm just going to read your paragraph because it's spot on. Within Oregon and Clackamas County, historical racist policies affected, and this is the thing, it continues to affect the availability of housing for BIPOC folks. And this stuff is still going on today. And I really commend you all for putting this in the report because, you know, we've come a little bit farther, but there's still a long way to go for folks of color to get into housing. And so I just commend you all for putting this in your report.
I'm glad that it speaks to you. We're going to be talking about that a lot more in a few minutes.
I had a question as well, and thank you, Councilor Nicodemus, for bringing that up. When on a previous slide, you talked about the affordability of Milwaukee. You said that it was more affordable in comparison to these other cities.
Yeah.
I mean, that's based on what? Based on our median housing or our median income for our city, or?
No, that is, we'll show some cost burden data in a few minutes that shows you some comparisons. I just simply mean if I was a person living, I didn't care where I lived in the Portland region, I might choose Milwaukie because your median sales price is $525,000. And so your median sales price is considerably lower than, say, Westland or Lake Oswego. There's some interesting dynamics that come in when you think about affordability that I'll talk about in just a few slides, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to point out that at that price range, 525,000, the median housing or the median income of our city couldn't afford a house at that
No,
price.
they cannot. And
Just
that
wanted
is
to point that
certainly
out.
where we're going next.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are pointing out these things.
Hey, Beth, before you go on,
Mhm.
I just wanted to hit on and make sure that we didn't leave Mayor Beatty's question concern about the pipeline. And if I recall, Beth, we analyzed numbers based on building permit data, not necessarily full pipeline data. So it didn't account for entitlements or land use, any projects that are in land use like Hillside, for example, which should be another 600 units for sure. So I just want to make sure that, I think that's correct. I just want to make sure it's clarified right now.
So Joseph, I have this, I was just making a note of this as something we need to just look at after we're done with this meeting and verify when we talk next.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, anything else?
Not seeing any other questions.
Okay. So now we start talking about affordability. And so what we're doing with this slide is what we're looking at is affordability based on the region's median family income of $96,900. And we'll look at how Milwaukie falls into that in the next slide. But a household this is a household of four that earns median family income, $96,900, can afford about $2,400 a month in rent and can afford a house, around $340, maybe $388. These affordability for purchases, of course, vary based on things like what rate you can get on your loan and how much you put down and so on and so forth. So we know that household can't afford the median home sales price in Milwaukie of $525,000. That's going to require an income of at least $135,000 or $190,000 to afford that kind of housing price. And that's about 140 to 195% of median family income. As we'll see in a moment or two, there's not a whole lot of households in Milwaukie that can afford that. Looking at other levels of affordability, when you think about housing that's going to be newly developed, housing that's newly developed has higher rent prices I'm talking about right now, but also higher home prices a lot of the time. So a newly developed house, a newly developed dwelling unit is not going to be affordable, certainly to people who earn less than $48,000. That's 50% of median family income. They can afford about $1,200 a month in rent. People at the 80% of median family income can afford about $1,900 a month in rent. And this is without being cost burdened. So when you think about your average monthly rent, which includes existing rental housing and new rental housing, including basic utilities, that's about $1,600 a month. I'm going to bet that if we were doing a financial pro forma, that we would see that people in the 80% of median family income, they would have trouble affording the rent on a new 2-bedroom unit, or they would just barely be able to afford it. So looking at this information in the context of number of households in Milwaukie, what we see is that about 19% of your households, or about 1,600 households, have income of 120% of median family income or higher. So a small percentage of these, less than 20% of your population, can afford newly built, can afford ownership units at your median sales price. Of course, some sales are below the median sales price and some are above. but not a whole lot of your households can afford the median sales price. And then when we look at your low-income households, what we see is that nearly 40% of them can't afford market rate rents. What they're going to need, if you have a similar share of new households with these income levels, what these households need is income restricted housing. So housing that is affordable and often has, or always has, funding from federal and state sources in it. So income restricted housing. You're not getting a lot of development in Milwaukie in this middle income range. That's between $48,000 and $78,000. Not a lot that's affordable there. Your newer multifamily development is most likely affordable in this middle income range of $78,000 to $116,000. So a lot of your new housing, unless it's income restricted, is going to be affordable to, you know, the top 40% of your population. The bottom 60% is going to have difficulty finding market rate housing that's affordable, and income restricted housing. Of course, there's just never enough of that. I can pop back to this in a moment or two, but as we look at new development, what you see is new development that is below 60% of median family income. It's almost always going to be income restricted. Your middle income housing oftentimes needs subsidy to be affordable, especially around 80% of MFI, but it's difficult for people below 80% of MFI. And then of course your new ownership housing is expensive also. So I'm going to dive into cost burden in a moment, but before I go there, do people have comments or questions about these?
Comment, this is insane.
Oh, yes.
I just want to take a moment here. I'm sorry. I'm getting agitated and frustrated. This is ridiculous. 60% of only less than 20% of people can afford Milwaukie to buy a house here. Because I don't see any more homes on the market in Milwaukie between $339,000 and $388,000. And if they are, you got about a 50 to 100 grand to put into it. Like, this is crazy. I'm sorry.
Yes. I'm with you. And this is the story we hear all over Oregon. It's just heartbreaking.
You can't even live here as a lawyer. That's wild. I mean, according to that graphic, but go ahead. Sorry. I apologize.
No, that's fair. Okay, so let's talk about this with a little different lens. It's a very similar lens, but we're looking at cost burden. So households are cost burden if they're spending more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. And housing costs assume rent and basic utilities like heat and electricity, or they assume mortgage, those same basic utilities, interest and insurance for your mortgage. So when we look at Milwaukie, what we see is nearly 40% of your households are cost burdened and about 17% are severely cost burdened. Now, cost burden doesn't account for things like accumulated wealth. So a household could be cost burdened technically and have accumulated wealth. As you'll see in the next slide, when we look at renter cost burden, I don't think that's what's going on for your renter households, but there's certainly a small number of owner households for whom that may be true. Cost burden doesn't account for accumulated debt either. So when you think about younger households, especially those, say, with school debts, that's not showing up in cost burden. It doesn't account for, things like the cost of childcare and so on and so forth. Now, when you look at places like Lake Oswego and Happy Valley, you might say, wow, are they doing a better job than Milwaukie is? And I don't make this normative. I don't think better or worse in a lot of ways. I would say that Lake Oswego and Milwaukie, Lake Oswego and Happy Valley are doing something very different than Milwaukie is. Their housing prices are much higher. People can't afford to go there and be cost burdened is what I think is happening in those communities. So please don't take this as Milwaukee's doing a worse job because its rates of cost burden are higher. It's that your housing market is different and you're affordable to more people who have more marginal income. Increasingly, people are just being pushed out of the Portland region. And when you see places like Milwaukie and Gresham and Troutdale, they have higher rates of cost burden because they're more affordable than some of our other communities.
Well, and that's borne out. I mean, Gladstone and Milwaukie are at the top here, and we're at the bottom of the price for house.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, it's borne out there too. Yeah. Interesting.
And then when you look at cost burden by tenure, what you see is 52% of your renters are cost burdened, and 26% are severely cost burdened. And so severely cost burdened means they're spending half of their income on housing costs. And that leaves less money for things like childcare and food and medical care and transportation and all the other things you have to have. And again, about 29% of your owners are cost burdened, but a much smaller share are severely cost burdened at that point. So owners and renters are both having problems, but renters are in a lot of trouble. And this is true. This is not a Milwaukie story right here. This is true across Oregon and for many, many of our communities. So when we think about the housing production strategy, partially we look at this based on income, because income tells us something about what people can afford without being cost burdened. And then we start looking at demographics. And I'm going to go on to those demographics unless anybody has questions about this.
Not seeing any questions.
Okay. So then we think about how housing needs differ by different groups. So people experiencing homelessness, people in different racial and ethnic groups, people over 65 and people with disabilities, they all have different housing needs, and they're all disproportionately cost burdened compared to the overall average population. So when we look at people experiencing homelessness, we don't have a whole lot of great data about them. What we do know about the number of people experiencing homelessness from sources like the point in time count, that systematically undercounts the number of people experiencing homelessness. We don't know exactly how much it undercounts it, but it's probably undercounting it it's counting about half the people or so experiencing homelessness. So if you multiply it by 2, you're probably to a better estimate. And then we've also got data about homelessness related to students from the McKinney-Vento data. And that's also presented in the housing capacity analysis as an additional piece of information.
And
when we look at incomes for, I'm sorry?
I have a question. So
Yes,
with
sir.
the McKinney-Vento data, that's only people that actually report it, right? So like there could be families who live with other families that are technically homeless, but they're just living with another family and they don't let the school district know.
Well, I mean, yes and no. One form of housing homelessness reported in McKinney-Vento data, and I apologize for looking away from you because I'm getting to that data on my screen, is people who are doubled up. Is it underreported, people who are doubled up? It's possible that it is, but I don't have any information. So what you see is a lot of people who are students who are experiencing homelessness are reported as doubled up. Are there students who don't report that? I'm sure there are. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry.
No. So what we know about people experiencing houselessness is that by and large, they have very low income if they have income. So they not only can't afford market rate housing, they oftentimes can't afford income restricted housing, and so need like a housing voucher to be able to afford income restricted housing. And they have unique needs that vary by reason for houselessness. So you could have emergency assistance sort of needs, including rent support. You could need permanent supportive housing. So that's housing with specialized services for people experiencing homelessness. You could need something that seems a little more straightforward, like access to an affordable unit, except there's nowhere near enough affordable units. And of course, people experiencing houselessness also need access to housing without discrimination. And there's quite a lot of discrimination, we know, around this group of people. So that's one group that we're talking about in the housing production strategy, and we present information in the housing capacity analysis about them. And then another group is people who are essentially people of color, so BIPOC populations. What we're showing here is median household income by selected race and ethnicity. So what you're seeing, let me give you a good example here. I'll give you an example for overall. Clackamas County overall, the median household income is somewhere around $80,000. In Milwaukie, it's, I think we said $61,000. You can see we've got these little whiskers that are showing here. Our whiskers are indicators of our margin of error because some of our BIPOC populations are very small comparatively. And so the data has a high margin of error, which is something to know about. So overall in Clackamas County, for average median income, we know that there's a small margin of error. A little bit bigger for Milwaukie, but it's still not that big a margin of error. So when we look at your largest population of color, which is Latino people, what we see is that the median household income is down around, I don't know, $50,000 or so, which is considerably below the average, the median household income for all of Milwaukie. We do have a wide margin of error, so we're not exactly sure where it falls in. But I think it's, I would feel confident saying that it falls below the overall average. And you can see that, say, the white population, its income is at about average. So you can see that different groups of color, communities of color, have lower incomes on average, with the exception of Asian population, which has an overall average higher income, but in Milwaukie, a really high margin of error because it's a small population. We didn't report data for African American or American Indian / Alaskan Native for Milwaukie because the samples were just too small. There just weren't enough people to have reliable data. So we know that for people of color, income is lower. And then when we look as a group, what we see is rates of cost burden are higher for people of color compared to white households alone. So you see a very high rate of severe cost burden for people of color. And then in owner occupied, you still see a higher rate of certainly cost burden, a little lower rate of severe cost burden for people of color. And so people of color, what is their housing need that is different than the overall average? Well, first of all, it's access to an affordable unit without being cost burden, and then it's access to housing without discrimination. And we know from a lot of the work that's done across the region that there is quite a lot of discrimination in housing. And of course, the small amount of discrimination that we know about is what's reported. And there's unreported discrimination, I'm sure. So people age 65 and older, what we're showing you here is that income, generally speaking, households 65 and older have income certainly below $50,000, more than half of them, and a small percentage have income in the higher ranges. And again, this doesn't account for wealth, but we do know that people 65 years and older are more likely to be cost burdened. They need access to housing that is appropriate for them. And so that's appropriate in terms of unit size, appropriate in terms of affordability. And then there's a greater incidence of disability for people who are 65 years and older. So physically accessible housing also. And then again, access to housing without discrimination.
Did you have a breakdown of ownership versus rental in this population?
No, I think one can get that, but I'm not positive.
Okay. I guess I assume more people in this age group own, but I don't know. I'd be interested.
That is generally true. Ownership peaks around age 65 and then begins to decline. But what I would say is the larger share of population that has income, even if they have wealth, unless they have a lot of accumulated wealth, income of $25,000 or less, is I would say less likely to own, unless they have a lot of income from wealth. Because owning a house is expensive. You've got to pay property taxes, et cetera, even if you don't have a mortgage anymore. But compared to younger people, people over 65 years and older are more likely to own than rent.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. But as you have people either choosing to downsize or being forced to downsize because of inability to continue caring for maintenance of their housing, or their housing just doesn't meet their physical accessibility needs, then accessing affordable units for rent is difficult because there's not enough that's affordable, and because of there's not enough that are accessible, and issues of discrimination. So people with disabilities, nearly 17% of Milwaukee's population has one or more disabilities, and that number is a little bit soft because people can have more than one disability. But what we see here is a range of disabilities. And Milwaukee's households, the level of disabilities are similar to the Portland region's, and lower than Oregon's. And that's not really surprising, given that your population, you have a larger share in the 20 to 39-year-old range who are less likely to have a disability than older population. So people with disabilities, their housing needs are very similar to seniors. They need housing that is physically accessible or otherwise accessible, given whatever their disability is. They need access to housing that's affordable, and they also need access to housing without discrimination. So those things flow all the way through here. And I realize I'm going a little bit slow, and I probably need to move on to the buildable lands inventory. But were there any questions here?
No questions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we've looked at housing need and housing demand. Now we're going to look at your physical land base. And we're looking at housing, ability to develop housing based in part on your buildable lands inventory. So how much vacant unconstrained land do you have? What densities will that land be developing at over the next 20 years? And then we've done a separate infill and redevelopment analysis, which I'll go over as well. So the first result of this, your vacant land within the city limits, you don't have a whole lot. Most of it is in your moderate density area, with about 12 acres in your high density and 10 acres in your commercial mixed use area. And of course, not all land in commercial mixed use is necessarily going to develop with housing included, but some of it is likely to. So you don't have a whole lot of vacant land. So we'll hold on to that for a few moments. And this is land that is unconstrained. So unconstrained, say, by floodplain, riparian areas, that kind of thing, natural areas. Then we did an extensive analysis about the potential for middle housing infill and redevelopment. We started with all of the land within the city that has in the RMD zone that has some development on it existing. Vacant land we handled in the vacant land analysis. So this is just land with development on it, on lots that were larger than 3,000 square feet. And any constraints, which you can see some areas here where we've marked constraints. We disregarded potential for redevelopment in those areas because of those constraints. That's consistent with what we did in the buildable lands inventory. So there's a lot of parcels. We narrowed down from the potential zone capacity, which, yes, that is theoretically possible, to sites that we identified as viable for infill and redevelopment, and all the way down for the approximate amount of infill and redevelopment that we would expect to happen here over the next 20 years, potentially. So you've got quite a lot of sites. There's about 57,000 sites, 5,700 sites that have potential zone capacity. When we narrowed it down,
I'm sorry, I just want
Yes.
to backtrack a little bit.
Mhm.
So those 5,800 sites, you're saying those are sites that were 3,000 acres or more?
3,000 square feet.
Pardon? I'm sorry,
3,000
yeah,
square
square
feet.
feet, not acres. And didn't already have 2 units on them.
I know, I can't answer about the 2 units. I know that they already have at least 1 unit on it.
Okay.
Yes, with no more than 2 units. Pardon me, my colleague did this, and luckily she left us. She left us with some clues here when I'm doing the presentation. So 2 units or fewer.
Okay.
So you've got a lot of small parcels that are bigger than 3,000 square feet, but aren't much bigger than 3,000 square feet that fit into that category. But we narrowed that down quite a bit, looking at different sites where they might technically meet those requirements, but the layouts of the site didn't really lend itself to potential for infill and redevelopment. And so in the end, we identified about 1,200 sites, 1,256, where you could do infill and redevelopment might work. And so narrowing this down, I can give you more detail if you want.
I definitely, when I read this part of the report, I had tons of questions about what really was the analysis that diminished, that made this number go down from 5,800 to 1,200. So I don't know if we want to go into that tonight, but I will definitely want to see more of that going forward.
So we looked at things like, mini lots are large enough for additional units, but they're long and narrow. So 25% of properties that were large enough had a suitable site and access. So these examples are ones just aren't suitable. So you have quite a lot of sites like that.
Well, I mean, the long and narrow ones were ones we focused on in our middle housing as places where we would likely see, flag lots or we allow in our middle housing code fourplexes that aren't necessarily attached. So 4 small units on a long skinny lot or something. So yeah, I guess I would want to see more of that analysis. Yeah.
And so this might be something, Laura, that we want to bring you specifically, have a discussion with you specifically about this, unless other people are really interested in this. Because I did not bring the full analysis with us, because that's an hour or two.
Full analysis. We just didn't bring it for tonight. So if you wanted to, I don't know what the appetite is to dig into that full analysis with this whole group, or we are happy to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Well, is it something that's readable or not really? Is it something where you can send us a document and then we can let you know if we want to have further discussion, or?
Well, the full analysis is in Appendix B of the housing capacity analysis. So I don't know if you read through that entire appendix.
I didn't, so I will do that.
Okay.
And just to add, sorry, Laura.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, staff and Echo Northwest also, we talked about this a lot because it was difficult to be like, well, middle housing code's pretty generous here. We expect to see quite a bit of development. But the truth comes back to the feasibility and the cost. It's not a perfect science here. I mean, we do have to make some guesses. And this is one of the guesses, or educated guesses we made and went back and forth with them. But yeah, Appendix B has more of it, just FYI.
And so I'll say that our staff who did this analysis, they've been behind a lot of the feasibility analysis for missing middle housing as House Bill 2001 was implemented. So they were doing a lot of financial feasibility, and that's really the screen for this.
Okay.
So I will continue on. We tried to triangulate because there's no good way, because we don't have a history of how much middle housing Milwaukie might see over the next 20 years. Our low of 600 we think is probably pretty low. Our high of 1,600, it may be a little high, but it's getting closer to what we think is a reasonable estimate in the certainly in the next 20 years. In 6 years, when the city has to redo this analysis again, you'll have actual data to say how much has been happening. So you'll be able to look at historically what's been happening.
You said 600? What was it?
600 is our low,
In 6
and
years?
1,600 is our high. And I can explain to you how we came to
20.
those numbers.
20.
Yeah, 600 is the low, 1,600 is the high over a 20-year period.
20 years.
Mm-hmm. And I can explain to you, if you'd like me to, how we came to those numbers.
Sure.
Okay. Hold on for one moment here. I'm just going to escape out of this so I can go to another hidden slide. So what we did.
If you think you have a slide up, you don't.
Oh, I don't have a slide up. All right. Do I now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for alerting me. So to get to the 600, this we first looked at. This is over a long period of time, Portland's conversion rate. And why we use that duplex conversion rate is because that's actually data from a long period of time. And if only that kind of thing happened at the same rate as it has over the last 20 years in Portland, that's how we came to the 600. And then I'm working up from number 3. So then looking at what's been happening in Milwaukie over the last few years. So this is a very short period of time. So what share of properties with infill potential based on prior zoning were permitted for development since the last update of the buildable lands inventory? And how is this varied based on the number of additional units allowed by zoning? So that resulted in about 1,200 new units. And then looking over, I think it's the 2-year period, I think, from another neighborhood in the region, I believe it's southeast Portland, what share of properties came up for sale every year, and when a viable property is sold, how often does it infill or redevelop? Portland has allowed this kind of thing for a little longer. So based on that kind of analysis, we're looking at about 1,600. There's flaws in all of this. These are very short periods of time, or the Portland duplex conversion rate. It's not the same thing as missing middle housing. But what we were trying to do is triangulate on this and give ourselves some reasonable estimates of what might be plausible.
I mean, I will say to you, having looked at redevelopment in Sellwood, that you must not have used Sellwood for number 1, because there's a high rate of redevelopment of properties when they sell in Sellwood.
Brentwood, Darlington, I believe that was used because that's more of a similar kind of land use pattern to Milwaukie.
Milwaukee, yeah. And I do think, what's the how do you factor in the lower sales price, right? I mean, maybe that's why Brentwood Darlington was picked, because its sales price was similar.
It was more comparable.
Yeah. But Brentwood Darlington doesn't have a light rail line. And I do think, we would probably see a higher rate than them. But anyway, okay, at least now I understand how you got there.
Well, it'll be great, like Beth was saying, in 6 or 7 years, when we get to do this again, we'll start to really understand what's actually going to happen. So we'll have better data to understand what might be in the future.
Right.
And so, only 8% of your parcels are likely financially feasible for redevelopment or infill and redevelopment. So as I think missing middle housing becomes more common and more known, that feasibility is going to change as more of that is built. So. All right, so part 2 of this is mixed use redevelopment potential. So this is something that we developed really based on staff knowledge. So staff identified all of these areas that were either in the pipeline, in purple hatching is the pipeline, or potential, and about how many units might be on these sites. So what we did is we just looked at sites that some of these sites may well be vacant sites. And so we set the vacant sites, like the Murphy site here, off to the side because we were accounting for that in capacity on vacant land. So on non-vacant sites, about 1,388 new dwelling units are possible if all of these things in the pipeline and potentially in the pipeline develop. So that's quite a lot of new housing potentially. And that's multi-unit housing. It's all mixed use. So when we start putting this together, on your vacant land, and remember, we don't have a whole lot of vacant land, you've got capacity based on historical development densities of about 970 dwelling units. We give a low and a high estimate for your middle housing because we don't know where it'll fall. And we use the one estimate of about 1,388 units for mixed use redevelopment potential. So your capacity varies between about 2,960 and 3,960 units. When we look at this compared to your forecast for new housing, what we see is, first of all, your commercial land, where you have so much of the new mixed-use multifamily happening, you've certainly got enough commercial land. In your RMD and our low estimate, if you only got 600 new units of middle housing in infill or redevelopment, you'd have a deficit. We don't think that's a likely scenario. So in our high estimate, you have a surplus of units there. And then in your high density, you don't have much land there. And you've been getting really historically low densities in high density. And I believe that the city just took some action that is changing what's allowed in high density and what your zoning districts are for high density. So you're more likely to get more housing in your high density, and perhaps you'll end up seeing some redevelopment in your high density eventually.
And Beth, just to be clear, the changes that we made, we didn't increase density by very much. It was a pretty small percentage points. That's the exercise that we just recently went through when we combined the high density residential zones, but the density itself didn't go up much.
Well, it went up by a floor in many parts of it, right? It went, I mean, the allowable height went up by...
No, the height didn't go up. The height's been the same.
No, when we consolidated 3 into 1, we raised the height in 2 of them by doing that. That was the vote I dissented on. So it went from 35 to 45 in all of those areas.
Oh, in 2 of the areas, yeah. But it's a very small it's just a very small percentage of land generally.
It is a small percentage. I mean, it's over there and well, anyway, it's a small percentage of land, but there are some vacant. There's at least one. Yeah, there are some vacant sites, and I'm curious as to if this was studied separately from the RMD for the thing about the likelihood of redevelopment, because it seems to me like there's that was the whole point of that exercise. I think was because we thought the likelihood of redevelopment was higher.
And we didn't do an analysis specifically of redevelopment potential near high density. That wasn't something that we had in our scope, so. Shall I continue?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Are you guys still seeing my screen? Okay, you are now. So our conclusion is that you have some issues in high density. You're probably fine in your moderate density. You're certainly fine in your commercial mixed use area. And so that's where and we know we have the other issues that we talked about around housing need. We know we have those, and that's what we'll be taking into the housing production strategy. Before we leave you here, I wanted to go through some of the stakeholder outreach that we've done so far. We did an Engage Milwaukie, and through that, what we saw is the issues. These aren't surprising. Our cost of buying a home and cost of renting a home, and lack of options and availability of housing. People who responded to this survey thought that Milwaukie needs more of the middle housing types, especially, and more single dwelling unit types. Less frequently said multifamily. The issues that Milwaukie should focus on, according to the survey, is long-term affordability, increase access to goods and services, accessibility by biking and walking, so a transportation outcome and a location of housing. Looking at more affordable rental options for people under $50,000 of income. That would be about 60% of median family income, I think, yes, for a household of four. Preserving and maintaining the existing housing and preventing housing displacement. These things all go into what we're looking at in the housing production strategy. One thing to know is that the diversity of people who responded is not as high as we would like it. So more of our survey respondents were white, fewer were people of color. Our survey respondents were older. They were more likely to own their own home, and they were more likely to live in a single dwelling home. This is consistent with what you see in most surveys that you do. And that's why surveys are one method of outreach, but you need other methods of outreach. So in pursuing some other methods of outreach, we started with your equity steering committee feedback. So their suggestion was looking at, how can we outreach more to communities of color? Outreach should focus on going where people already are, making it easy and accessible. But we also acknowledged that, or they acknowledged with us, that there are limited community organizations that the city could work with. And so thinking about partnership opportunities and other creative ways to access underrepresented people. This is going to be an ongoing challenge as we continue to try to get feedback on the housing production strategy as we're developing it. I think we'll end up talking certainly to service providers who provide services to, say, low-income households and households of color. And hopefully that will give us some more feedback. And then we're working on other options for public engagement. So that is where we're going at this point and where we've been. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
I had a question, and I guess, I don't know if it's for you or for Laura, but I was looking on the website trying to figure out, this work, you've had both the sort of advisory committee that's residents, and you've had a technical committee.
That's a mix.
It's a mix, and they're all one committee?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a little less than clear from the website. Okay.
And if you want to see, you can see exactly which each person represents. It's all listed here on the website. It tells you exactly who they're representing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One
Got a
question.
really knowledgeable committee.
Really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah. You've got a lot of good people on that committee. One question I had was about using the term BIPOC. I remember having a conversation on this council before about whether or not that was the term to use or whether we should find another term. And I just wanted to sort of flag that. I'm not the person to opine on that, but, you know, I just want to make sure maybe our equity steering committee has a view on that. You know, our equity manager might weigh in on that. I don't know. Councilor Nicodemus, didn't you raise a concern about that before?
I'm all for just calling it out for what it is. If we're talking about Black folks, we say Black folks. If we're talking about Latinx folks, we say Latinx folks. When we, you know, there's a reason why it's Black Indigenous and then people of color, because Black folks and Indigenous folks have been stepped on and kept, you know, out of the race for so long. That's why it's BIPOC. Now, when we start to talk about other folks of color, we name it. We, you know, I think that's what we should do. If we're talking about Asian folks, we talk about Asian folks. So, but for right now, you know, that's the term. And until somebody else comes along and comes up with a new term, I mean, it's cyclical, right? And there's always going to be something else. But I feel like we should just name it every time we talk about it.
So, Counselor, my one comment back is sometimes, I mean, we try to when we can. Sometimes the data is poor enough that if we put people of color into one group, into a BIPOC group, then we can do some analysis that shows us some things that we couldn't do because the margins of error are just so bad.
Like even the Black folks in Milwaukie, you didn't even have a bar for that, you know, and it's, I totally get it because there just aren't a whole lot with it. Like 2% of the Oregon's population is Black. So then when you spread it all out, I think the majority of Black folks live in Multnomah County, which once again, like when you were talking about outreach to different groups, there are no community groups based in Clackamas County. Like we can't go to SCI or Black Parent Initiative. All of these groups are based out of Multnomah County and they do the majority of their work in Multnomah County. It's very hard to get a CBO that's based in Clackamas County and doing this work in Clackamas County.
So I fully agree with you. And I think where we can, we have called people by the different races and ethnicities that they identify as, but we don't want to erase anybody where we can represent decent data as at least a group.
I totally get it.
Well,
Thank you.
may I add to that? Just a thought, you know, when it's possible to disaggregate the data, then we can do that. But data is different than the philosophy of this council and how we put identifiers on individual populations. So I think that we're really talking about two different goals. Of course, we want to disaggregate data so that we have a good picture, and where it makes sense to aggregate up into specific populations, let's do that so that we can get a look at how these issues affect populations. But when we're referring specifically to communities, I think that it's an additional effort that we need to be mindful of and that we need to take, and that's to call out populations as folks identify with those populations.
Okay, other questions or comments, other areas of, I've got a whole page, but. So I wanted to ask, we've heard the governor's declared a housing state of emergency. I was in a meeting with the governor's transition team and a bunch of Clackamas County housing folks that I sent people notes on. Is there anything that is going to come out of that could come out of this legislative session that would affect anything you would write in this report?
I certainly think there are things. I think they'll affect the housing capacity analysis less. right now at least. Your next housing capacity analysis may be very, very different based on some of what I'm hoping will happen in this legislative session. But I think in terms of the housing production strategy, the biggest unknown is, are there going to be additional sources of funding to support affordable housing development, and what will they be, and how will cities access them? And that I don't think we're going to have a good enough answer on by the time we have to have this report done. But the advantage here is that the report is what the city is going to do with what's in the housing production strategy. That's implemented over the next 6 years. So after you adopt it, then you have 6 years to implement it. And things are certainly going to change in those 6 years. So if you have a new funding source that comes along and it's available in year 2, you might be able to do more of some action than you thought you could do, because now there's more funding. So definitely, I hope that things will come out of the legislature that are relevant to this, and that will change some of what the city can do, hopefully. But there's so many guesses to take. I've read some of the LCs, and I don't know which ones are going to stick and which ones are going to make it.
I guess this is just an observation, but when we talk about vacant land and we talk about capacity of, for redevelopment, I ran a search and the word tree doesn't appear anywhere in there. So we don't talk about our tree code. And we don't think, I think the vacant land, there's going to be some competition for creating parks out of some of our vacant land as well. So, it's just a cautionary note about thinking about every piece of vacant land as housing, because there are competing demands for the vacant land we have as a built-out city, as a city without an urban growth boundary. We have constraints. No one else had?
I would say, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 6 years. But all of this housing affordability, it's a deeper issue, right? It's who has the wealth, generational wealth. If you're low income, if you're a person of color, your opportunities of owning a home or living in an affordable home are, for lack of a better term, they're down the toilet. And we could sit here and talk about this, but there are other things at play that keep people from owning homes, being able to afford rent. When, I think the renters moratorium, right, is up, and evictions are going to be up, and then, there are going to be more people. And if income isn't going up, but home prices are going up, it comes back to who controls the wealth. Who controls the wealth and keeps people from the American dream, right? A home and a white picket fence. People.
Well, and I don't know how much control we have over any of that, but I do think I did hear the housing people say to the governor's staff that long-term rent assistance is the way to keep families housed, as we face these eviction, there still is rent. Well, I also heard calls for the rent cap to be lowered. Obviously, the rent cap went, we had eviction, we had prohibitions on eviction, and then we had rent cap, and we had mass inflation, and so the rent cap went, 14.6%, which is going to push people out. And I did hear them call for long-term rent assistance as a way to try and keep people in their houses. Hopefully we will see that come out of the state, and that's something we should watch and, support if we see the opportunity. And home ownership has always been a thing for me. Creating more home ownership opportunities. And I think the state law on condominiums and as I understand it from some research, it's about the building liability that keeps condominiums from being built. We have 1,500 apartments or whatever the number actually is, zero home ownership opportunities among them. I do think that's something we want to watch in the legislature and try and promote.
Even folks trying to get home loans, that stuff is inherently racist, and it's going to keep people who are already behind in the race aren't even going to qualify to get a loan to buy any property. And so, it just comes back to all of this stuff is a deeper issue that I don't know we can solve. And I don't, I'm just so deflated right now, going through this. It's just so, it's just so disappointing. As a teacher, all I think about are my students. We could be talking about so many families and how that affects kids, being home. It's a deeper issue. I just can't. I don't know.
So, Counselor, if I can offer a little bit of perspective that is, I don't know, it's not the whole thing, but in a couple of communities where I did this sort of work back in a decade ago or so, in Hood River and in Newport, things have gotten worse, but part of the reflection is how much worse would it have gotten had the city not taken the actions that they took. And so Milwaukie can only influence so much. And of course, influencing the state, as you were talking about, is an important thing. But can you keep it from getting worse, at least some? Can you help some people? You can't help everybody. There's just not the resources there without an enormous amount of resources. But can you make some things better? And I like to hope that the answer is yes. But I share your deflation also. This is hard stuff. And I think about your high schooler of the year who is, such a high achiever. And, not all kids have that advantage either.
Just to echo Councilor Nicodemus, because it's more than deflating. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. It's angering, right? Because it's like, there's so many people that each of us know in our own circles that this is affecting, right? So many people. But I do think that there is a lot that we can do to at least give people a fighting chance, because without it, then they don't have anything. And I don't know if that's, more rent-to-own developments, whether it's, bringing in cheaper development like 3D printing, whether it's, Portland has similar home buying options where they actually provide up to $100,000 in down payment assistance. It's going to take a multitude of things. There's not going to be one, obviously, silver bullet for any of the issues we're facing. But I mean, if we can just give people a chance, as an example, something that I look at is personal reflection. Sometimes when people ask me, if I give $5 to someone or $10 to someone or $20, somebody asks for $100 to borrow, I rarely ever say no. I probably don't ever say no. And a lot of people look at me like, why do you keep doing that, knowing that you might not get paid back? And the thing is I tell them, I see a little bit of my struggle in that, right? That if when I needed that $20, that $50, that $100, if somebody would have just been there to give that to me, maybe that would have just helped me enough to get me a little bit more ahead of the situation I'm in, right? And that's kind of what I feel we're here to do, because we're not the state, we're not the federal government as much as I wish we were, and I think the five of us could do a hell of a job at that role. But there are little battles here and there that we can win that eventually could turn the tide of the war, right? And I think that every option has to be on the table. I sat with Joseph and discussed a potential for a public-private partnership where, the city would look into maybe partnering with homeowners that want to have an ADU on their property but can't afford the cost of it. Maybe there's, with a combination of 3D printing, we can bring We can have grants for homeowners to not only build, small ADUs that are affordable, but also give them an opportunity to earn a second income, because that's the other side of the coin, right? Is the wages and the fact that nobody's getting paid enough to live. So I just think there's a lot of opportunities, but it's going to take a lot of digging, and that's the hard part, is how do you fight the deeper stuff that you're talking about, right? I mean, how do you combat that? And that's a great question. I don't know if anybody really has the answer to that, but I know that these little efforts and these little fights and these little battles that we put up, I think give people more of a chance to find that solution. And also with that rental control bill, if you want to even call it that watered down, there's exemptions to that. I'm not sure if people are aware, but there are exemptions for that rent control bill.
Well, it only applies to buildings that are 15 years old.
Exactly.
or older.
Which makes absolutely no sense, because every new building built here in Milwaukie is market rate, right? So you have families in Sherwood, a mother actually, who diagnosed with cancer, father can't work, permanent back injury, and they have a child. Their rent went up 32%. No thanks to the bill. So the state has to do something, right? They want to tout a lot of the stuff they do, but you realize you're doing this stuff and families are still struggling. So, we're going to do everything we can on our end here in Milwaukie, but I'm also going to challenge and ask the state to do more than what's been done these last 10, 15, 20 years, because it's not like we came out of COVID with this issue. This issue has been here. And similar to climate, what do we keep doing? Kicking it down the road. So whether it's inclusionary zoning, whether it's mandating people to build affordable, I don't know what it's going to take, but it's going to take a multitude of those things, and I'm willing to take each one of those and put them on the table to fix this. If the state's not going to do it, then we need to figure out how to do it on our own. It's ridiculous. And I'm right there with you.
I'm not sure if it makes sense in this document or not, but I think it would be helpful to start to look through what we have available to us for prevention strategies against involuntary displacement. I think it's the East Portland Action Plan. It's a community group that put together their own set of recommendations to advise the city of Portland, like maybe 10 years ago. And it might be something worth bringing to our discussion here, working through some of our plans and figuring out what sort of systemic strategies we can enable, and how that applies across all of our planning, not just housing affordability, but urban redevelopment and maybe even the parks conversation, the tree code. So I don't know what the process is for that. Anne has her hand up.
Hi. A couple of things. First, I wanted just to call out that we're running a little over. We're about 15 minutes past, and we should be coming back to you all to talk about this again in the near future. I appreciate the input on additional information you'd like to have included. So I did see Beth make note of that, Counselor, as you were speaking. But I think I think the story we're hearing tonight is systemic. And it's systemic across all, I wouldn't even say Oregon metro areas. I would say all national metro areas, if not worldly metro areas right now. So there's always an opportunity for us to look at best practices in other spaces and to see if there are programs run by smaller cities like ours. So my one invitation is just, if you find things that other cities are doing similar to what Councillor Stavigny just brought up, other reports that we should be considering, please get those over to Laura, and she will add them to the mix of discussion points for the committee and for Beth. Are there any other topics that we feel like we need to go through tonight, or are we at the point that we can bring this back at the next update when it's ready?
And I would also like sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
I would just also like to submit that this is the first component to this. It's the first draft, but I think what's more interesting to probably everyone here and this happened too at the HCTC, is everybody wants to get to the solutions. And so that comes a few months later when we talk about housing production strategies. So it has some of the elements that were brought before us, systemic stuff. We can at least try to make a dent in and see what our current resources are and see what makes sense feasibility-wise, resource-wise, staff-wise. We will go over that, and that is by far, I think, what most people want to talk about. I don't know if you heard that, Beth, but sure seems like this group wants to talk more about that than.
Well, and the good news is
That's always
that
the case.
it's on the agenda for February 7th, so it won't be long.
Oh,
So we'll be
okay.
back.
Okay, great.
We may not have all you want by then, but we'll have a lot of what you want.
Great. I'm glad to hear it's coming back so soon. I do think a couple things. One is I have some more technical kind of comments that I will get to staff in an email, but I do feel like, a lot of work's been done on this, and this is the first time we're seeing it. And I've gotten questions from residents like, I saw something about a housing capacity committee. What's that? So I do feel like we need more public awareness. Whether, I don't know what the plan is for the next round on Engage, but, through Jason's Friday emails to the NDAs or whatever, I do feel like through the pilot, getting a little bit more awareness of this. And I think this slideshow actually, as depressing as it was, is really good because people are probably not going to sit and read the 80-page report, but that slideshow kind of puts things in easily digestible form. And so, maybe some way of getting that out there. I did have a question, which is Councilor Srivati brought up inclusionary zoning. What is the state law? I know it's fluctuated over time. What is the state law on whether we can add an exclusionary zoning ordinance? Inclusionary zoning.
As I understand it, they put a limit on the number of units that has to be created in order for there to be.
I heard it was, at one point it was 20 or more
It's 20 or more.
in Portland. I didn't know if that was the state law.
It's across the board, unfortunately. So
Okay.
if we want to go down that route, that's a legislative fix,
Yeah,
so to speak. If you want to lower that threshold.
yeah.
But we can still do that here in the city though. Because we haven't had, what developments have we had that were less than 20? Everything we had, 243 in Monroe, not one affordable. Kellogg's 190, 170, not one affordable.
Well, actually, Coho is
No,
affordable.
Kellogg.
Oh, Kellogg Bowl,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
not one of them
Yeah,
affordable.
yeah.
Not one of them in Monroe, 243 is affordable. So,
Yeah.
20 for me is like, I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, so that may be a conversation point for the next round. We do have a few smaller, like the one on Harmony Road was probably not 20 units. We do have some smaller units, but the point is taken. Other comments, questions, other things you'd like to see when they come back on the 7th? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For the
Thank
report.
you.
That was an excellent, Beth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay. And we are now going back to Kelly Brooks on the new City Hall. We're not having a resolution, correct? Okay, so
No resolution.
the script, okay.
Yeah, and it's not really my place, but that was a fairly robust conversation. Do you need a break or anything? Okay.
Well, I guess the question is how long?
I'm gonna make it short.
Actually, let's take a break.
Okay.
Let's take a break. Let's take a 5-minute break. Give everybody a chance
I'll
to
make up the
stretch.
time.
Okay. record after a break and with Assistant City Manager Kelly Brooks to talk to us about our new City Hall.
Okay, yes, thank you for having me. I know we're running a little behind, so I will try to keep this relatively concise, but if I'm going too fast, let me know and I'll slow down. So, and then Joseph is here. I'm not gonna make him come up here with me. You can if you want. But he is sort of taking over this project and since I'm leaving. And so he's been getting up to speed. And then Mandy, who's also you have seen all night, she's our development project manager. And Mandy's really been the kind of the backbone of this project from the beginning. So she's actually the one that knows everything, but she's staying and she works closely with Joseph already. So they're a good team on this one moving ahead. So I realized maybe not everyone is familiar with the project. So in 2019, right before the world shut down, we bought the Advantis building on Main Street. Once we finish building it out, it will be home to human resources, finance, community development, engineering, and the city manager functions of the city. Our council chambers and the front counter are going to be on the 3rd floor. The staff will be on the 2nd floor, and then there will be a community room on the 1st floor. And I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like. So you can see most of the tenant improvements are actually happening on the 3rd floor. The 2nd floor is largely untouched. And then the meeting room space, I would encourage those of you, maybe not right this second, but in a little bit to go do a tour if you haven't toured the building, just so you can kind of see what it's like over there. It'll make more sense. But that meeting room area, at some point in time was a branch, and then it got converted to IT space. And so that is all getting kind of gutted and turned into a community room. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, so the total square footage here, including the basement of usable space, is about 25,500 square feet. This building you're in right now, total is 11,900. The new chambers that will be constructed here will be just under 2,000 square feet, so 1979. This room is 849. So it is quite a bit bigger. It's quite a bit more space than what we have now. And most importantly, it does allow the consolidation of all the front counter services of the city. So right now you can be in a place where you roll up to Historic City Hall and you're trying to get you want to talk to an engineer on duty about plans. And like, sorry, you got to drive to JCB. You can be at JCB talking to a planner on duty and you want to pay your water bill. It's like, no, sorry, you got to drive to City Hall. So in this building, all of that is in one front counter, which is on the 3rd floor. When we talked about this, we considered having the council chambers and public facing operations on the 2nd floor just because it's a little easier to access. The 2nd floor, when you go over there, has been recently remodeled. So as a cost saving measure, frankly, we knew if we did the 3rd floor tenant improvements, we would have, it would save the project quite a bit of money because we could leave the 2nd floor as is. So that's sort of the general layout. Our project schedule, demolition is slated to begin in February, so very soon. We are still on target to hit a tentative completion date by August and then do relocation in September, which would then have us operating fully in that space in October. So that's still the schedule that we are hitting, and I'm actually kind of amazed by that, to be honest. So I'm pretty proud of the team for that one. So here's where we are in terms of what's in and out. Again, tonight we pulled it. We were going to do the guaranteed maximum price for the Howard S. Wright delivered elements of the project. We are still refining pricing right now. And so there's a couple of scope elements that we still can't really confirm. And we need to be able to do that before we issue that. Right now it's rescheduled for the 7th. It really does need to go on the 7th without starting to slip that schedule. So hitting that February 7th date for the GMP is important, and I'll flag that again when I get to the end of the presentation. So confirmed, definitely is happening. You will have a council chambers. It will happen. You will have that. It's critical. We can't move in without it. You will also have the consolidated front counter, and you will also have the community room improvements. What is right now in the pricing exercise is we very much would like to remodel the third floor bathrooms to make those gender neutral. Right now, we have a dearth of gender neutral bathrooms within this building. There's currently 2 of them, and they are both not in the world's most convenient places. So to meet the needs of the public and to meet the needs of our staff, we would very much like to remodel the third floor. It is an expensive element within the project, and so we are having to sharpen our pencils on revenue and expenses to see if we can make that happen. So as I've mentioned, I won't go into the specific dollar amounts here because those are privileged to negotiations, but we are hoping to use some of the resources from the sale of this building in order to make that work. And we also have identified the exterior signage of the building is actually very much in alignment with tax increment financing, because it's some of the biggest gateway signage that we can install in the city is on the outside of this building. It fronts both 99E and Main Street. So that we believe is another source of resources that can make this project whole. So between the two and some very sharpening of pencils that Mandy is working on, we are hopeful that we can bring that in, but won't know for sure until we're back on the 7th. The light wall. The light wall, I mentioned it in the past. That was my attempt at trying to bring some openness into the lobby when we found out that we could not afford to replace the walls of the staircase with glass. At this point, the light wall is still a possibility, but the path for it runs through a group of folks that are going to be talking about art, because the fund source for the light wall at this point would have to be the $125,000 that's allocated to public art. We have this project is eligible. It's a requirement that we do the 1% for art. That's $125,000. So we are convening a group. I would say Jordan's leading that process, similar to the Letting Library. To request for proposals is actually out right now for artists. A light wall is an element that can be paid for with those resources, but they are going to have to balance what they get. That's a pretty significant chunk of the resources would go to the light wall. Is that where that group feels like is the best expenditure of our art dollars? So at this point, the plan set will build a wall that can include a light wall. So it will all be built out. It can accommodate it either with those dollars or in a future phase. But we won't know that piece of it for another couple months. That does not have to be known in order to move forward with the GMP on the 7th. But that's why that is still a pending scope item. Does that make sense? Does everyone know kind of what I'm talking about when I say light wall, or is it super confusing? Okay, good enough. All right. Okay, what is out? Much to Scott's chagrin, the modern fold wall that would divide council chambers into 2 halves so that it could operate as 2 spaces is out. We cannot afford it. At this point, we have also cut out painting the 2nd floor. So we will not be updating the paint there right now to try to make everything else pencil. We were going to add some additional cabinetry in the community room. That is out. We cannot afford to do that quite at this time. We can certainly come in and add it later. And then we were looking to I'd hoped to do a larger basement remodel in order to retrofit the locker rooms that are down there, because we do have limited parking in this building, and we wanted to have a nice space for folks to come that were biking or walking to work. That is completely outside of our financial abilities at this time. That'll have to be a separate project at a later date. So we're going to do our best to try to put some lockers down there, hang some hooks, maybe update some lights, but it's not going to be the larger remodel project that we had hoped, just due to costs. So that's what's confirmed, and that's what's pending, and that is what is out. Do you all have any questions about that?
I have a question.
Okay.
Can we do naming rights? Like the city of Milwaukie or City Hall, brought to you by Alaska Airlines. I'm joking.
I hadn't considered that, Councilor Nicodemus. I now am passing this on. So if you all would like to do naming rights, I feel like, you can.
Arena.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we could just, should have thought about that before we made those signs. It hasn't been on the table, but honestly, maybe, yeah, I think Mandy's open to other ideas to raise resources. But for now, hopefully we don't have to sell naming rights. Okay, so where are you at in total project cost? Essentially, right now, you were looking at a $3 million project for all of the various improvements. The GMP will be about half of that. And that is because we have the tenant improvements that they are doing, but in order to hold this schedule, which again, is kind of amazing that's been able to happen. The city has directly contracted with our low voltage folks, all the security cameras, things that had long lead times that we were worried about would blow the schedule. So those are all contracts that the city has gone out and solicited for. They've been the ones you've been moving through the process. You've probably seen a bunch of them going through. Yeah, so furniture, card readers, all of the work in council chambers that's coming through Key Code. That's something that we wanted to be directly involved in because we had pretty specialized needs there. So that's been working its way through. We are still carrying an owner contingency. It's a little lower than I would like, but it's there to help get us through this next phase. But that's kind of where we're sitting. Do y'all have any questions before I leave this slide?
What is facilities?
Oh, if you go into the budget book, you'll see that there's a series of like general fund facilities expenditures. It's the vehicle chargers and the gate and the fencing for the parking garage. And hopefully it might there's some other things like flagpole. There's some improvements to the third floor kitchen, which are out of scope for the general contractor. But there's just some work that's going to need to be done in there. There's no cabinet. You can see underneath the sink and it's not good. So those type of Damien expenditures and delivered elements is what that's for. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions about what's in scope, the schedule of the project?
Do you know if Jordan has reached out to the Winter Light Festival folks with regard to the light wall?
No.
So all of the artists that participate in the Winter Light Festival, they're convening now and they're gathering and putting their projects together and getting ready for the festival, which starts on the 3rd.
Did you tell me to do that last time and I didn't?
Did what?
Did you tell me to reach out to them last time and I didn't?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I'll tell them.
I can send you the organizer's name.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I would.
I know Jordan knows some of them because there was some totally unrelated to City Hall. There was some talk about trying to get the Arts Committee wanted to try and get the Winter Lights Festival to have something in downtown. And so I know he has some contacts there because he's talked to them. I don't think it panned out, unfortunately, but yeah.
Please, yeah, and you can send that to me or Ann, or we'll get it to him.
Okay.
Yeah. That is, I should mention that. So that is open right now. So the request for qualifications for artists is open right now. So it would be a great time to forward it on. And hopefully that will close at the end of the month, and then that committee will convene in February, and they'll kind of quickly review and make some decisions because we actually need to know what the art is to keep the project moving along. Okay, so I've said it a bunch of times, but just know, next month, Mandy, Joseph, and the team, which will include Howard S. Wright and our designers from Bainbridge will be here. That's when you'll actually have the guaranteed maximum price resolution that will give Howard S. Wright everything they need to move forward. The plan review and all that is on track right now, thanks to Mandy. And then you will need to do some type of supplemental budget adoption at some point because we're adding these additional resources to make it whole. So that is where I'm kind of looking, just making sure everyone, I don't want no surprises with you all where you're like, wait, why did we approve this? And then you ask for other resources. We will need the additional resources to build out the scope as identified in the GMP. So if you have any concerns with proceeding down that path, please let me know. No concerns?
Okay. Not seeing any.
Okay.
Seeing any concerns?
I'm gonna take it. Okay, that's great. That's it. I'm here through Friday. After that, you should talk to Joseph. And he's sitting in a really good spot to take it from here and do a great job. Did I miss anything, guys?
We're gonna miss you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, well, let's talk about that.
You don't have to. You can save that for legislative and regional items because I believe you all have a council president to elect next.
Yes, oh, we do.
potentially.
That's right.
And then I'll be right back up here again.
Okay.
So you don't.
Fair enough.
How about that?
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you, Kelly and Joseph and Mandy. So we do have a council president to elect. So what is a council president? I don't know if does our charter define the term? No. I mean, I think in practice, what a council president has been is the person who chairs the meetings when the mayor is out. Sometimes when there are when there are other city events, like I remember one time for the Arbor Day, the mayor Gamba couldn't make it, and at that time, Councilor Falconer was the council chair, so she did the Arbor Day, speech or whatever. So it's basically that.
Stand corrected. There is a brief description in the charter.
Okay, president of the council. At the first meeting following the seating of any duly elected, which is this meeting, okay, the council shall elect president, shall preside, but should have no more than one vote. Okay, well, okay. Fair enough. So, I don't know if anybody had, I served as council president for a few years. Mayor Gamba hardly ever missed a meeting. So I think I got to chair maybe one or two. But anything can happen. It could be that, anyway, that's the gig. I do probably plan to travel a little bit. So there may be some times when I need somebody to chair, even if I'm dialing in from remote. It's not really feasible to chair from remote. So, so that's that. Anybody want to?
Nominate?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to nominate Councilor Nicodemus as our council president.
I'll second that nomination.
Councilor Nicodemus, will you serve if elected to be council president?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else want to? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to nominate Councilor Nicodemus to serve as council president. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. None heard. He's approved unanimously as council president. Congratulations.
Thank you. I have a little thing I'd like to say. I'm truly honored and thankful for the support of my colleagues in this new leadership role. In 2020, I became the first Black person elected to Milwaukie City Council. Growing up, I've never dreamed of holding an elected office. I view my role in history really just as a relay runner in the long race towards human progress and racial justice in this country. It's a journey we all have a role to play, and I think my time has come to make sure that Black people are part of that arc towards human progress. It's going to take each individual, if they choose, to become open to valuing everyone's input, because we really do make better policies when everybody's at the table. I will finish with this. We must acknowledge we have a long way to go as a country and in this city, but Milwaukie should take a moment to acknowledge this and be proud of this day. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. All right. So now we go to council reports and legislative and regional issues. We have one of those that maybe we'll let Rebecca do her letter first, and then we'll end with, okay.
Absolutely.
So Counselor Stavengard sent a letter around for everyone to read. Hopefully you got a chance to read it this afternoon. I thought it was a great letter. It's to the County Commission in support of the Project Turnkey purchase of the hotel by I-205. As you may have heard, the various folks, including the city of Happy Valley, are pushing back against that purchase. So I think it's really important for us to express our support. I thought she wrote a great letter. I sat in on there was a briefing at the Chamber of Commerce on this project last week, and then tomorrow there's another one before the Clackamas County Business Alliance. That one I think you had to register in advance for, and I didn't. But I do feel like it's good if there's still an opportunity to get in on it. I think it's worthwhile to be there to sort of express support, which I was doing in the chat of the other one. They're both Zoom meetings, yeah. Anyway, so if you want to take it with your letter.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate the quick turnaround on this and the support of council. The letter will go, as Mayor Beatty said, to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. They're in a due diligence period right now for property, the Quality Inn, which came to them outside of the normal process. They had been considering other properties previously, and then the owner of this site reached out to staff with the county. And so they had to change course. And, I think that it's important not only to provide those type of transitional services, and, this doesn't come at any additional cost to Clackamas County taxpayers because this is a grant from the state of Oregon. And it positions us really well to be able to align supportive housing services funding. So, but it's also just really important as a jurisdiction to be clear about our values, and especially in light of the presentation that we had earlier in the meeting today, I think it's really important to send this. So would you like me to read the letter into the record, or you want, everyone has received it.
You don't have to do that, but it's fine if you'd like to. Go ahead.
Well, we're already kind of running behind, and
okay.
I'm fine if we don't. I pretty much summarized it, and this would be expressing Milwaukee's support for the purchase of the Quality Inn for the purposes of transitional housing. They have not fully articulated the focus population for this site. I did reach out to the county following a question from Council President Nicodemus about the focus population. They're looking largely at single adults, but are also open to conversation about family depending on the suitability for that. So, so we can expect some updates soon, I think, around that.
Well, and I did put in a request through the Oregon Mayors Association for funding, for state funding to help Northwest Housing create a new family shelter. We'll see if that gets traction or not. But I do know there are definitely people exploring those avenues as well. The thing I heard in this meeting last week that I hadn't realized was how big, like this thing is 100+ units, whereas a lot of the other hotels that have been considered and talked about before are 27, 32, they're much smaller. This is a lot of units and creates a lot of new capacity.
Yeah, and it's really a wonderful setup that there's supportive housing services funding to supplement the acquisition of the physical property, and then the SHS funding would provide the operations. They've had some really good conversation with Clackamas County Sheriff's Office around livability issues and some concerns that have been brought up. I feel confident that the staff will be able to work out policies, so that the site can still remain an asset in the community, and I feel very supportive of this.
Yeah, the Kaiser representative at the meeting was, has been in discussions with the county for setting up a good neighbor kind of arrangement. And I think that's all in the works.
Yeah.
So
I
people
think
will have a forum. People who have concerns will have a forum if there are problems.
this will probably not be the last letter or advocacy that we do, but I'm excited to be part of this one, and I appreciate your consideration for this.
So do we need to take a vote, I guess? It's the equivalent of a resolution, so.
We've historically done
Just
like kind of a thumbs up for these. So if everyone's nodding and saying yes, we sign, then we just sign it as a, we put all your signatures on it.
Okay, everyone's all right? Okay.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up to us, 'cause I know that's a big deal going on.
I don't have a formal presentation, so I was just going to remind you, if you haven't registered for the night, but the registration deadline for LOC is the 19th. So if you want to go and you haven't signed up, you should sign up. And Suzanne did work to set up appointments with our representatives on the 25th. So I believe that's all in progress. And then it was just to see if y'all had anything else that you wanted to bring forward in terms of support.
Yeah, I mean, they just started today, right? So
Yeah, they started today.
I don't have anything substantive. I will be trying to do some following and of what's going on in the next couple of weeks before our February 7th meeting, but I don't really have anything today. Anyone else? No?
And then I also just wanted to say, Scott's jumping in to help do this now that I'm leaving. So and it is going to be a little tricky because he's operating 16 cameras and taking notes on other things. So just if there's any way, if you do know of something that you want to bring in, I think he's good at reminder emails, but if you know kind of earlier, like 5 or 4 days before the meeting, like, hey, I think I want to talk about this, or I want to bring this item. If you can get that to him as early as you can, then it'll just be easier for him to kind of keep track and make sure kind of circling back on letters and stuff after. So is that good?
And I will, that's awesome. And I will share, I will remind everyone that LOC will start doing some reporting on their website and then their weekly newsletter. So watch that for things. And then I will share the reports that come in from the lobbyist Thorn Run for the Metro Mayors Consortium as those come in. Haven't seen anything yet. Okay.
Yeah, and then the last thing is just me. So now we made reference to it a couple different times in the meeting tonight, but just in case anyone is watching this and it's like, what are you talking about? So I accepted a position with Governor Kotek as a transportation infrastructure advisor, and my first day is Monday. So it's happened really quickly. So apologies for the disruption, but it was a bit of a whirlwind. But I am really excited. It also does mean if you're down on the 25th, you can meet with me. I don't have a phone or even an email right now. So you just text me on the one you have if you want. I don't even know what my schedule is. But if you're down in Salem on the 25th, I'm sure I could
be in Salem kind of daily.
That's my first week. Oh no, I'm not supposed to be there daily. But I think for the first little bit here, the first week, I need to find my desk and figure out what my job is. So yeah, I'll be down there on the 25th. So you can definitely text me and I'll pop out.
Okay.
Maybe the weather will be good, but so it's been really wonderful working with you all. And I will actually know a lot more about legislative issues than I have been the entire time I've been talking to you about them. But I will not be giving this presentation anymore. But Scott knows where to find me if he has questions. So,
well, thank you so much, Kelly. You have been really a value to the city. I mean, I remember when Ann hired you because it was right after we had done battle with you at ODOT over culvert money for the Kellogg Dam removal. So I think there's some sort of beautiful symmetry about, you leaving us as we get Kellogg Dam funded. But I know you were a big part of getting that all pulled together and so many things, the safe projects, the whole, I think the whole way the city does business, we've heard about these, what do you call them?
Charters.
Charters, yes. And I think it's been a great thing because I witnessed several times before SAFE and before you came of incidents of repaving a street and then putting in utilities like 2 years later, and you're like, who's coordinating these things? So I think, you've done a lot of amazing things for the city of Milwaukee, and we've been very lucky to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything, but we are going to, some of us anyway, are going to take her out for.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to say anything. You can just go to the beer store if you want. Or if you don't, I also know it's late, so I totally understand. And I will see you again, I'm sure. So.
I just want to call out, sorry, before it all passes by and I can't tell who's actually seeing things and not seeing things or saying things. This is my one shot to do this on air, so I'm going to do it. Kelly Brooks has been by far the most amazing right hand I could have ever hoped for. I know that you all see the work she does, and I think you only see maybe half of it, honestly, because she has been such a key instrumental part of making each and every day possible for the city of Milwaukee. She's made it possible for me to go on vacation. She's made it possible for me to breathe some days. And to be honest, she brought, I think, $25 million to the city of Milwaukee in 5 years to help on key priorities of this town. And we wouldn't have done it without her. So she, in her resignation letter, said she didn't have the words, and I don't fully have them yet either. But I will find them with time. But I just had to call out in public tonight how incredible it has been working with you, Kelly, and how lucky I and this team have been to have you around. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Woo! Kelly Brooks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. With that, are we ready? Oh, do I have to read this? Okay. After the regular session, council will hold a reception. That's probably a bigger word for it than it deserves, but for departing Assistant City Manager Kelly Brooks, the social event will be held here at the Beer Store Milwaukee at 10610 Southeast Main Street. All are welcome to join council in thanking Kelly for her service to the city. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.